Installing Ignition on a Windows platform is actually really simple. We can download the installer by going to our website, inductiveautomation.com, clicking on the Download tab up at the top, and going to the Current Release link. If we scroll down on this page, you'll notice here we have all of our installers. I'm going to look at the Windows section since I'm using a Windows operating system, and I then have to decide if I want the 32-bit version of the installer or the 64-bit version of the installer. Since I have the 64-bit version of Windows, I'm going to go ahead and click on the 64-bit version of the installer. Now before we can actually run the installer, we have to make sure we have the latest version of Java 8 on our machine. If we don't have it, we can go to Oracle's website, download it, and then install it. Since I already have the latest version of Java 8, I'm not going to worry about that. Now that my download's complete, I'm going to go ahead and click on it to run it. As you can see, the installation setup wizard has opened up. At this point, the installer actually checks to see if you have Java 8 installed. So if you don't have it installed on your machine, it will actually direct you to Oracle's website where you can download and install the latest version of Java 8. Like I mentioned before, I already have it installed, so I'm just going to click the next button to move on. I then need to accept the license agreement by clicking the I accept the agreement radio button and click the next button. We can then specify an installation directory for Ignition. The default is C, Program Files, Inductive Automation, Ignition. I like that installation directory, so I'm going to leave it as is and go ahead and click the next button. On this screen, we can decide what platform version of Ignition we want to install. We can either install Ignition, which is the full-fledged HMI SCADA platform, or we can install Ignition Edge, which is the streamlined version of Ignition that's built for edge of network and embedded applications. I want to install the full Ignition platform, so I'm going to make sure the Ignition radio button is checked, and then I'm going to click the next button down at the bottom. At this point, we can select whether we want to do a typical or custom installation. A typical installation will include a pre-selected list of modules and install all of them for you. If you instead elect to do a custom installation, if we take a look at the next screen here, you have the option to choose which modules you want to install and which modules you don't want to install. I'm okay with the typical installation, so I'm going to hit the back button, make sure the typical radio button is checked, and click the next button. At this point, the setup wizard is now ready to start installing Ignition. You'll notice that Ignition installs really quickly. Now that it's finished unpacking all those files, it's going to have a checkbox here that says Start Ignition Now. I want to leave that checked to start the Ignition service, and I'm going to hit the Finish button, where it's going to try to start the Ignition Gateway service. Since Ignition is a web-based service, I can access the Gateway web page not only from this machine, but any machine that has network access to this computer, which gives virtually anyone within my network access to the Gateway web page. You can see that once the service finished starting, it brought us here to the Gateway web page, where you can start using Ignition right away. If the Gateway were to take too long to start up for whatever reason, at this point it would instead take you to the Gateway Control utility, which would allow you to start troubleshooting your Gateway.